What is the spiritual root or opportunity for growth when we're experiencing depression?
Well, again, my experience, there's many kinds of depression. So it's a kind of a very broad answer. A lot of depression is really lost space. And so when people lose something and they lose the meaning, they get depressed because they were focused on that part of their life. And I don't think people realize, it took me a long time to realize that we're actually driven by meaning that what we decide is meaningful is what gives us purpose in life.
Mm-hmm.
So if meaning is taking care of a child, and then the child dies, we've lost all meaning and we become depressed and so forth like that. So, healing depression at the first level is establishing meaning. What is meaningful to a person? The second thing I have personally found is that people have core energy. In spiritual circles, we call it Kundalini. Freud called it sexual. There's different ways people look at it. But when the core energy is frozen or blocked, people get very depressed. And my experience is that a lot of the deeper depression people see, where they have to have like electroshock therapy in the past, were due to these deeper, kind of blockages of that core Kundalini energy. So the second thing is, how do we open that up? How do we deal with that? Today, of course, a lot of people are struggling with all sorts of things, gender identities, sexual identities, things like that. That can also lead to all sorts of problems in people where they don't feel like they're living who they are. And when people don't live who they are, they also get very depressed. So these are all things we can look at. For me personally, what I do with depression is I help the person find what's in the deepest part of their heart that's causing them depression. And what I find is that most of the time, there's an experience that they're witnessing that's unresolved in their heart. Like, let's say their girlfriend left them, or their wife left them, or their husband isn't treating them right, or something like that. And then out of that experience, they become hopeless and they find despair. And once we can find that experience and walk them through that experience, usually the depression will go. So for example, let's say that you're feeling hopeless because you never think that your husband will love you. If we can get you to find that place of hopelessness with your husband and change it, then we can actually take you out of the depression and give you hope. And that hope itself is often actually the magic key that helps depression disappear.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. What are the steps we can take from a medical spiritual healing perspective to heal ourselves from depression?
Well, a lot of times in depression, what happens is people feel the depression, they're in the emotion, but they don't get behind it. And the behind it means the experience is causing the depression. And that's hidden in the subconscious. So for that, we have to help you get to your own place of subconscious. There's something going on in there where something happened and you interpreted it some way. Like you said, okay, well, I lost my husband or my boyfriend. I must be bad. I did something wrong. I'm not good enough, or something like that. So what we have to do is we have to get you to that experience, and we have to help you find your interpretation of that experience and understand what's causing your depression, which is I'm hopeless, or I'm lost, or I'm no good, and I'm hopeless about it. And then again, using certain methods, we can transform using God's light. We can take those things out of you. We can change those things within you very, very deep down inside your heart and your soul, where you're no longer feeling hopeless, because God will show you a different way of being. And God will show you like a connection to love, or a connection to light, or compassion, or mercy, or trust, those names of God that we call. When you bring those lights in, you'll see that that place of hopelessness will change at the core of your being. And when it does, you won't be depressed. You'll actually come to joy. You'll actually find joy in yourself. The other thing we can do is that we can actually teach you how to receive joy directly. Joy is a frequency of light, and there's ways of actually bringing joy into your heart and your soul. And so we can actually teach you how to connect to those reservoirs where joy comes from, and you can actually absorb that light directly. So these are different ways of going at it.
Mm-hmm. Wow, beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And the third question is, what can a medical spiritual healing practitioner do for someone who is suffering from depression?
Well, medical spiritual practitioners, again, their work is to get to the heart of the matter. And of course, later, to get to the soul of the matter. Now, these hearts and souls are parts of our spiritual nature. In other words, you don't really see your heart, right? You have a heart in your chest, but your heart that loves, where is that coming from, right? Not coming out of your physical heart, it's coming out of something else. Well, behind that heart is a soul. That soul is much deeper than your physical heart or your subtle heart. So the medical spiritual healer is trained to be able to access the heart and be able to open it and heal it. And then the medical spiritual healer is there to teach you to go further to access your own soul. The soul is where your spiritual teachings are going on. This is where you're really learning who you are as a spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Spirituality means our return to spiritual consciousness, the consciousness of our spirits, our souls, and ultimately the consciousness of God. That's what spirituality is. A lot of people think of spirituality as, gaining spiritual powers or occult powers, things like this. That's not real spirituality. That's actually kind of a corruption of spirituality. Real spirituality is our ability ultimately to stay in the presence of God and manifest that presence. That's the highest level of spirituality. So the medical spiritual healer is trained to help people to find that, to return to the one, to return to God, to return to divine truth, to wash away the self, the ego, the emotions, the false beliefs, the pain inside a person, the hidden experiences, to bring them and to release them from a person, and so that they can have that direct experience of divine flow. Once you have that, I promise you, you'll never want to leave it.
How does dealing with depression help us walk more deeply into the divine reality?
Well, depression at a certain level, you could say, is being cut off from God. So if you really understand, at the core of depression is hopelessness, and hopelessness is from being cut off. And if you reestablish the connection, then you have hope, and the depression slowly disappears. So the spiritual walking of depression is actually the establishment of hope and the connection to God, and to realize that you're never alone, and you're never separate, and you're never hopeless. There's always help on the inner side,
Absolutely,
but
yeah.
you have to establish that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where this is how it helps you spiritually.